$150 million, that's the price of one machine. An ASML EUV lithography system, a device that uses extreme ultraviolet light to etch circuits smaller than a virus onto a sliver of silicon. Without it, you cannot make the world's most advanced chips. A decade ago, China was racing to catch up. Today, it is stuck at 14 nanometers, roughly 5 generations behind the cutting edge. The United States has banned the export of these machines, along with the most powerful AI chips from TSMC, which controls 90% of the global foundry market. The strategy is working. By every measure, it has succeeded. And that is precisely what makes it so unsettling. Because semiconductors power everything: your phone, your car, your country's weapons. So the question is not whether China feels the pressure, it does. The question is, can China build the future without the chips that power it? The answer is not what you expect. This is the story of a war fought not with soldiers, but with sand and silicon, and the surprising path China is now forced to take. The most valuable resource on Earth isn't oil, it's sand, refined into silicon, etched into circuits smaller than a virus. These chips now decide who leads in AI, who builds the next weapon, who controls the future. One machine makes it possible. An ASML EUV lithography system costs $150 million, the price of a small airliner. That light prints the transistors that power your phone, your car, your country's most advanced fighter jet. Semiconductors are the backbone of modern warfare. They run the algorithms that target drones, the neural networks that translate speech, the models that predict pandemics. Without them, artificial intelligence is just theory. Therefore, whoever controls the chip supply chain controls the next decade. The United States knows this. It is rapidly ramping up efforts to hobble China's progress. But what happens when the world's superpowers start weaponizing them? The United States didn't just ban chips, it banned the machines that make them. Picture this: a single device the size of a city bus, costing $150 million, roughly the price of a small airliner. That's an ASML extreme ultraviolet lithography machine. It prints the world's most advanced processors. Without it, you cannot build cutting-edge AI chips. Therefore, Washington leaned on the Dutch government. They blocked ASML from selling these machines to China. Then they tightened the screws, further cutting off access to TSMC's foundries, which dominate 90% of advanced chip production globally. China's own fabs are stuck at 14 nanometers, roughly 5 generations behind the frontier. Beijing filed a complaint with the WTO, but the damage was already done. Huawei's revenue dropped by $7 billion in a single year. The message was clear: you cannot buy your way to the future. Yet one company holds the key to the entire industry. How did they become so powerful? Subscribe to stay ahead of the next tech revolution. There is one machine the entire future of AI depends on. It weighs as much as a small airliner, and no one on Earth can build a copy. This is ASML's extreme ultraviolet lithography machine. Only one company in the world makes it. Only one company in the world can use it to produce the most advanced chips. TSMC, the United States, saw this bottleneck. Therefore, it didn't just ban chips, it banned the machines that make them. In October, Washington announced sweeping export controls targeting precisely this equipment. ASML, a Dutch firm, was blocked from selling its EUV systems to China. The message was clear: you cannot build the future if you cannot build the chips. China filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization, but the WTO moves slowly. Meanwhile, China's best fabs are stuck at 14 nanometers, roughly 5 generations behind the cutting edge. They cannot buy the machine, they cannot replicate it. The patents, the supply chains, the decades of precision engineering, all locked behind export licenses, yet China is trying. Huawei, battered by a $7 billion revenue drop from sanctions, is pouring money into domestic alternatives. But even with these machines, China is still years behind. China controls nearly half the world's chip-making capacity. That sounds like a position of strength. But look closer, and the picture fractures. The vast majority of those chips are made on older, proven nodes. China's fabrication limit sits at 14 nanometers. That's roughly 5 generations behind the cutting-edge 3-nanometer chips that power the world's most advanced AI. The gap isn't just a number, it's a ceiling. Every AI model, every training run, every inference, they all demand the densest, fastest transistors. Without access to those, China's AI ambitions are running on yesterday's hardware. The United States knows this. Its export bans don't just block finished chips, they strangle the supply chain that builds them. ASML's EUV machines, each costing a fortune, are locked out. TSMC, which dominates advanced production, cannot ship its most powerful designs to Chinese clients. The result is a slow, grinding choke. China can still make chips, but it cannot make the chips that matter for the future. Yet one company is defying the odds. How is Huawei fighting back? That's the price of a small airliner every single day for a year. The US sanctions cut off its access to the world's most advanced chips. No TSMC, no ASML machines, no cutting-edge AI processors, but Huawei didn't fold. Instead, it turned inward. It started designing its own chips, not as powerful, but functional. It built its own software ecosystem, Harmony OS, to replace Android. It found workarounds in the cloud and in 5G infrastructure. The company that was supposed to be strangled is still breathing, yet the gap is real. China's best fabs can only reach 14 nanometers, roughly 5 generations behind the 3 nanometers chips powering the latest iPhones and AI servers. Every nanometer of that gap represents years of research, billions in investment, and a mountain of patents. So Huawei survives. But survival isn't victory. The US keeps tightening the noose, and China keeps filing complaints with the WTO. The question isn't whether Huawei can endure another year. It's whether China can build an entire AI future on chips that are half a decade behind. So, what's next in this high-stakes tech war? The United States is betting $200 billion on a single answer, that it can outspend China's ambition. That's the CHIPS Act. Enough to build a dozen new fabs, train a generation of engineers, and lock down the next leap in transistor design. But money alone doesn't make a chip. It takes years to install an EUV machine, months to dial in a process, and a workforce that knows the difference between a defect and a disaster. China doesn't have that time. It's racing to close a gap that keeps widening. Its best fabs still run on 14-nanometer nodes, 5 generations behind the frontier. Yet Beijing is pouring state funds into homegrown lithography, recruiting foreign talent, and forcing every tech giant to buy domestic. The result is a parallel ecosystem. Slower, less efficient, but self-sufficient. The US wants to starve China of the tools to build AI. China wants to prove it doesn't need them. Both strategies carry risk. A decoupled world means 2 supply chains, 2 standards, 2 internets. The winner won't just dominate chips, it will define the next era of warfare, surveillance, and economic control. So who's ahead? The answer isn't in a factory or a trade war, it's in the next breakthrough, and the one after that. So can China build the future without the chips that power it? The answer is a quiet no, not yet. China's best fabs can only carve circuits at 14 nanometers, roughly 5 generations behind the cutting edge. The machines needed to go smaller. One costs $150 million, about the price of a small airliner. And the company that makes them, ASML, is banned from selling those machines to China. The United States has locked the door. Therefore, China's AI dream stalls. Without those chips, you cannot train the largest models. You cannot run inference at scale. You cannot compete. Huawei, once a global giant, saw its revenue drop by $7 billion after the sanctions hit. The company survives, but it is hobbled. Yet the lesson here is not about one country. It is about leverage. The US, but Washington controls the tools that make the chips. That is the real monopoly. Not the factory, but the key to the factory. The US CHIPS Act pours $200 billion into domestic production. China files complaints at the WTO, but the bottleneck remains. The lesson, in the age of AI, hardware is the new oil, and the pipeline is guarded. But there is another monopoly even more hidden, one that controls the very light that etches these chips. That story is next. This is the Monopoly Matrix, where power plays unfold.